Welcome to the very first episode of Decoded, a Lost Codex podcast. My name is Jesse, and I'm the writer, director, and narrator for the Lost Codex episodes. My role in the Lost Codex episodes is that I research the lore and story of the game, cross-reference it with novels, chronicle, and other sources of lore, and write the scripts. I also write the screen directions and decide or propose initial ideas on how we're going to lay out each of the scenes, and eventually record the lines and provide feedback during the scene setup and animation stage. I play a small role in the music stage where I select certain soundtracks that I feel work well with both the narration and the flow of the animation, but I leave most of that to the editor. I also run the Patreon, Instagram, Twitter, and general chores of the brand. Joining me here today on our very first podcast episode is Jeff, our producer.
Hello there, my name's Jeffrey, and I'm the producer, the video editor, the video animator, and just about everything graphically and visually that you see for the Lost Codex. I record all the assets, mostly from backgrounds from in-game, and all of the objects and the characters from the WoW model viewer. And I basically put those together inside the shots. Then, and this is a stage I usually live stream as well recently, I animate them according to Jesse's voiceover. And then finally, when the animation is done, I add sound effects, and then I mix that. And then finally, you have a video on YouTube.
Now that introduction's out of the way, welcome to the very first episode of the Decoded Podcast. Before we dive into the actual theme of today's first podcast, I kind of want to talk about why we're starting a Lost Codex podcast. Why are we doing this? Well, I don't stream as often as I should, which will be rectified, but I've had quite a few people message me asking, why don't we have a podcast? Why don't we have an audio element where those who can't tune into the stream can still listen to some of my thoughts and discussions on different characters, stories, plot lines, stuff like that. A lot of our discussions happen in Discord chat, but, you know, it's something a little bit different about having these live conversations, especially with one or two other people. So I figured we'd launch this podcast. Depending on the theme or setting of the day, we'll be talking about the relevant history of whether it's allied races, different areas in the game, or upcoming raids or story potentials. We'll talk about the in-game presence of that character or characters, weapon, whatever we're talking about in the actual game or past games, as well as the major characters and potential future storylines. Although this is a Lost Codex themed podcast, Jeff's presence will be varied here and there. The discussions that we're going to have, and by we, I mean myself and any future guest hosts, could be between Jeff and I, or myself and other people. We may do some technical themed podcast episodes where Jeff talks about the making of behind the scenes steps for certain videos, but most of these podcasts will be lore related, story related, headcanons, my thoughts on where the story is going, what I would have done differently, stuff like that. How often are we aiming to do this? We want to do one show per week. We may record it live on Twitch. We may not. Depends on the layout and the style of which we're doing this. This is entirely new territory for both myself and for Jeff. If you're used to listening to the podcast for many years now and you have any recommendations, feedback, anything, we're open to all that. We want to make this podcast an enjoyable source of knowledge for you guys and something enjoyable to listen to, whether on the way to work, whether you're playing games, stuff like that. So definitely looking for feedback after our opening episode. Today, we're not actually going to be talking about any specific lore elements or anything like that because it is the very first episode. There's an actual special theme we have going on today. And as of today, as of recording this podcast, April 17th, 2018, today is our 2nd year anniversary since the Lost Codex went live on YouTube, the day we made the actual channel. Happy birthday, Jeff.
Happy birthday, Jesse.
This podcast will probably launch on April 21st, 2018, which is the actual 2-year anniversary of our very first episode. So although April 17th is when the channel was made, you guys didn't see any episodes until April 21st, 2016. So we might launch this podcast officially on our 2nd year birthday, totally by accident, but we decided to go live this week. So here we are. Now, before we talk about the last 2 years of the Lost Codex, I think we need to go back in time. We need to talk about, in the beginning, Jeff and Jesse's origin story. A lot of people here who may be listening may know the origin story between Jeff and I, because we've told that story dozens of times on streams or in Discord. But for those of you who don't, sit back and listen, because this takes us way back to BlizzCon 2010. BlizzCon 2010 movie contest. I got involved in the machinima community in late 2009. By mid-2010, I was working with a team where we were writing the script and preparing the video for the BlizzCon 2010 movie contest. That year, we entered the film I Am Forsaken. It was my first official project where I was the director and scriptwriter, as well as the narrator. And looking back, there's definitely a lot of things that I would have changed, but it was a good start. Not good enough, apparently, because we came second place in the contest, which was good. We were excited, but who came first? Jeff, tell us who came first.
Well, there was this one guy from the Netherlands that somehow became the grand prize winner. And I think he won like 2. And then there was this one dude in the middle. I can't remember who that was. The mafioso swing video. That one.
Yes,
won, like,
yes, I remember that. It was like a musical.
Yeah, it was a musical. Very, very nice. But somehow I managed to beat all 3 of you. And to this day, I have no idea why, but I did.
I do know why. And I remember that time I was watching BlizzCon 2010 in my basement with a bunch of friends. We had the virtual ticket. It was the first year they'd done the virtual ticket. And watching the mafioso swing, I said, okay, that was musical, that was catchy. And then watching Rocket of Love, that was Jeff's video that came first place. That video had a lot of custom animation that we didn't do. So all of these videos were very visually engaging. I Am Forsaken was a very dark and tragic story. Rocket of Love was very lighthearted and funny and was a comedy. But where we differed, aside from themes, was the style of animation. And Jeff, if I recall, there was quite a few custom facial animations you did in your project.
Yeah, I had recently discovered a program that you could use to give a still image of a face, make it like animated in a cartoony way, which more or less fit the World of Warcraft style. So I ended up using that, and apparently Blizzard really liked that because, well, they thought I should win.
And so you did. I remember seeing a lot of salt on our video saying we should have won.
That is, on your video and on mine combined, there was like a salt mine of it.
It was Overwatch levels of salt. And I remember going to your video and chiming in as the director of I Am Forsaken and telling people, like, back off, like let this guy won, let him enjoy, like sure, there was a tad disappointment we didn't get grand prize, but like, don't attack the winners. If you're gonna get mad at anyone, get mad at Blizzard for deciding. But like, it was bad. Yeah. So that was Jeff and I's first encounter, and it wasn't even an encounter. It was just we came second place.
I saw your video. I loved it. I was like, how the hell did I beat that?
A couple months later, and sure enough, our team took a little bit of a shift. So the musician and I, his name is Rallied. He'll come up a little bit later. We were looking for an animator. When I had first gotten involved in the machinima community, I had become friends with Irdine. And Irdine, back in the day, was a really well-known machinima artist. So I messaged him saying, hey, like, do you want to work together? And he goes, I've already got my team going. I said, no problem. I said, you're really well connected. Do you think you can put us in touch with anyone who's looking for a team? He put out the feelers. And who sent us a message? Jeff.
Yeah. Because I think by then BlizzCon 2011 was already announced, and while I had some ideas to do another entry, I hadn't really come up with anything solid yet. And for some reason, I also didn't feel the need because, well, I already won the grand thing last year. I don't let's let other people have a go. But then through social media and all that, I got in contact with Jesse and I'm like, well, I've actually never joined a team. I've been making World of Warcraft Machinima. I've been looking it up. The very first World of Warcraft Machinima video I uploaded was on December 24th, 2007. So I've been making this type of Machinima for nearly 11 years now. Wow. Damn. That's actually the first time.
Think about that. That's huge.
That's huge, yeah. I've been making this type of video for more than a decade. Wow. But yeah, long story short, I hadn't actually worked in a team besides the occasional back and forth with voice actors, and that was mostly sending them a script and then getting the voice acting back. So yeah, I joined Jesse for the projects we did that year, which eventually turned out to be Outbreak Lordaeron, which is sort of like a Left 4 Dead type of story set in Lordaeron just as the plague breaks out. So start of Warcraft 3 campaign-ish in terms of the timeline. And we worked together with Jesse on one hand and Wallet on the other hand. And Wallet was great in terms of the music. He really gave the video a nice theme and really made it flow together. And that combined with the voice actors we managed to find. And funny enough, I think like two of them were named Jesse. You got Jesse Cox, which is well known in the World of Warcraft community. And
that was also the I think that time was roughly around the launch of OMFG Kata when Jesse Cox was already well known in the machinima community, but that was when he started to take off in the YouTube community as well. Mm-hmm. So that was like right around that time. And the other Jesse, what was her screen name back then?
Rarbug.
That's it, Rarbug. Yes. Yeah. So it was myself, Rarbug, Jesse Cox, and another well-known voice actor, Matt Greenberg. Many of you might recognize that name from Tales of the Past. He was very actively involved in a lot of machinimas, what a lot of people call the golden days of machinima making. So Matt Greenberg, Walled, myself, Jeff, and two Jessies entered Outbreak Lordaeron. That year was my very first BlizzCon. Because Jeffrey and Walled were both European bound, I'm from Canada. When we got our ticket to BlizzCon, it was only one ticket. We all said, well, what do we want to do? Do we want to sell this ticket, or does one of us want to go? And I think you opted out right away because it was kind of far and very last second. Yeah,
it was very last second, and I'm known for being terrible with last second surprises like that. Not to mention the fact that, and I know this now by fact because I've been to a couple of BlizzCons, a direct flight from Amsterdam to Los Angeles quickly goes towards 800 euros. And I doubt it would have been much less back then. So I was like, yeah. If there's two things I'm terrible with, it's sudden surprises and sudden changes to the planning and spending money.
So we opted to send me to represent the team. And so I went down to my very first BlizzCon, and we came second place. It was awesome to be there. I got to be Jesse Cox face-to-face. Didn't meet Rarbug that year. That started off on a whole nother train that we're not even gonna get to today. Jeff and I will have to come back for a BlizzCon special episode because that started off on a tradition that has not gone anywhere else.
Yeah.
After Outbreak Lordaeron, there was no BlizzCon 2012. Blizzard did not host one, much to our sorrow and dismay. BlizzCon 2013, we entered the Machinima movie contest. We made the video Road to War. Mm-hmm. Which happened to be the year Warlords was announced. So our video referenced the entire orcish story on Draenor with Durotan and Grom and all these main orc characters. Also happened to be the year they announced Warlords of Draenor. So we didn't place, but a lot of people wrote on our video, like, did you know about the expansion? Did you have inside information? We're like, no, we took a gamble. It was right around the time of Mists of Pandaria. The rebellion was starting to escalate because it was right around the mid-end of Mists of Pandaria, so that's when they announced Warlords. And the theme of the video was an orc conflicted of siding with Garrosh or Vol'jin. We didn't place that year, but the next contest we did place in as a team was the Heroes of the Storm launch video in 2015.
No, because 2014 was the very first BlizzCon, and remind me, but actually, 2015 probably was, because we had already been to like the first BlizzCon, and London after that, yeah. So 2014, I went to my first BlizzCon, and 2015, like in the first half of that year, Heroes of the Storm would be officially released, and in order to turn that into a party, Blizzard actually organized a release party in London town. And to commemorate that, they also had a video contest, or I think a creative sort of contest, like make something creative to commemorate Heroes of the Storm. So I was thinking a bit about the story. Jesse chimed in a couple of ideas. What we turned that out was Enter the Nexus, I think we called it. Basically a story about a gnome walking through Stormwind, sees a poster about Heroes of the Storm, and he wants to be a hero of the Storm as well. So he goes to train with a cheesy 80s montage included. And by the time he's ready, he goes up to the portal to enter the Nexus, so to speak. And then there's like this, you need to be this tall to enter sign. And he's not allowed to enter.
Yeah. So what happened with that episode was, because it was second quarter of 2014 or early second quarter of 2015 rather, I was working on this preparations for the script for the BlizzCon movie contest when this came up, and it was a very minor thing. It was very small.
I think we made it in like a week, because it was like literally a 2-week contest. I
want to say less, because it was very last second, and Jeff messages me and says, "Hey, I'm gonna enter this contest. It's very small." And I said, "Go for it. Like, if you win, you get to go to London. That's awesome. It's not a huge contest. Go for it." Sends me a script. He goes, "What do you think of this?" And I remember throwing in some of my own jokes and tweaking some lines, but it was all Jeff's original idea. A week and a half passes, and he places, and he places, he wins. So he's going to England. He's going to London. And what was really special about that contest was, I remember saying to him, "Hey, like, bring me along, throw me in your suitcase," kind of a joke, go have fun in London. And I think I made the joke. I said, "Tell them to send me over instead, and I'll fly you over." And I said it as a joke mostly because the trip was in 2 weeks, and there's no way I could have went to London in 2 weeks, with that short of notice at work. And then you said, "Should we send a message and ask them?" And I thought, oh, you know what? I was kidding when I said that. But so we sent Blizzard a message, and we said, "Hey, the prize is for one person. It's for Jeff flying from the Netherlands to London. Could we give that plane ticket to Jesse, someone who worked on the project as well, and fly him out to London instead?" Because the plane ticket from Canada to England versus Netherlands to England was dramatically different.
Oh, yeah.
Blizzard said, "Absolutely, 100%, we can do it." They didn't even hesitate. They said, "Sure," and we assured them, like, "Don't worry, even though there's going to be two of us, keep the hotel situation the same. One of us will sleep on the floor, blah, blah, blah." And I ended up paying for Jeff's flight from the Netherlands because my flight was reduced to nothing because of Blizzard. What we didn't know is Blizzard was so okay with it that they doubled the prize package and upped our room to a 2-person suite. Since you double the things in the 2 shirts, 2 keychains, 2 everything in the prize package.
Yeah, too bad I only discovered that after I had used the Heroes of the Storm codes they gave me. I'm like, oh, these are a nice amount of codes. That's nice. Oh, wait, they doubled everything. Okay.
Turns out it was meant for 2 people, but it actually worked out because they were European codes, and they wouldn't have worked for me either way. So that doesn't matter. And so Jeff and I got to go to London, which was amazing. We got to stay in the same hotel where Blizzard developers were. And what was really cool about that trip was they extended my flight home by a week because we wanted to stay and explore the city. We had to pay for our own hotel after the first couple of days, but we got to go to London, England for the launch of Heroes of the Storm as a team, which was really awesome. We got back, I flew back to Canada, Jeff flew back to the Netherlands. We got started on our BlizzCon 2015 contest, which was garrisons. This idea that the garrison followers are off doing these different funny missions, whether it's a drinking contest or they're playing Heroes of the Storm against the Iron Horde.
Yeah, you basically, the idea was like, okay, we need to have an original sort of entry or something outside of the box. And I don't know which one of us suggested it, but it was, at some point it was like, okay, what's the thing about Worlds of Draenor? It's the garrison and the mission. What do those guys do when they're on missions? When you don't see them, it's like The Sims. They go they go to their work, and then a couple of hours later they come back. And yeah, from then on, we sort of like came up with these, I think 3 or 4 like funny situations. I think we also at some point wanted to include an event where, for example, your heroes were getting a kitty out of a tree, something silly like that. Yeah, but that's what we formed that video about.
And at this point in time, our machinima team had kind of shifted. Walid's career took off professionally. Definitely check him out. I'm going to do a little plug-in for him. His name is Walid Fagali. Check him out. The man's an amazing painter, an amazing artist, an amazing musician. Some of his music was actually used in the trailer for the Warcraft movie, so that was really cool. So this was just Jeff and I working together for this project, but we got to work together with Jesse Cox again and Matt Greenberg, which was awesome. This was also the first ever project, technically the first project, but also the secondary project that we worked together with Diva Gregory. And we had also entered a second movie contest. Our entry was called Men in Hats, and we'd worked with Diva. She voiced a couple of lines in that machinima as well. We ended up coming second place. Again, BlizzCon 2015. That was awesome. But what happened next? What happened after that? BlizzCon 2015 faded. We entered the Christmas season, early 2016. And this is where things started to shift. So I remember thinking and saying to Jeff, we only make machinima movies once per year. 2015 was a fluke because we made the...
We made the London thing, which was like a minute and a half-ish thing. And then we specifically started work on the BlizzCon 2015 entries very, very early because we wanted to make 2 entries.
We did. And that was something we'd never done before. Only one of them placed, which we expected. We didn't expect both entries to win. We just wanted to try 2 different projects. One was very story-heavy and one was very comedy-heavy. Comedy seems to be the defining factor for winning. So I said, aside from the fluke of entering, making 3 movies last year, we don't really make a lot of content, except when it comes to contests. So the idea started to form in my head to make little animated shorts. I think I was sort of inspired by the Lords of War and the Burdens of Shao episodes from Blizzard. I wanted to create these little moments in lore and tell this story, not just for contests, but just like, what if we started making movies to post all year long? So the question became, would it be actual lore by Blizzard? Would it be headcanons? Would it be the fill in the blanks? Would I get to kind of explore things that people had never thought of before? And we went back and forth on this idea. And I think one of the original ideas, and I had put out a casting call for this, it was an initial script involving Ner'zhul, Bolvar. But the question kept coming back to, was this headcanons and was this not official lore? And I think you just mentioned a couple minutes ago, Jeff, before we started recording, you actually found one of those recordings, a test render for that particular episode.
Yeah. It's like this hooded dude walking through Capital City in Lordaeron, and at first it's like it's all brand new and shiny, and there's like rose petals falling down to like mimic the scene where Arthas walks through the city from Warcraft 3, and then like snap, it's all old and decrepit and destroyed, and the hooded dude still walks on. And that's just about as far as we ever got with that project, I think, right?
I think so. You spent a decent amount of time using clever camera angles to imply that the city wasn't destroyed, because everywhere you go, it's very ruined and tattered.
There's hardly an angle you can find there that doesn't involve some sort of destruction.
You had done it, and it was looking really well, but a couple problems came out of this project. We realized that after spending 2 weeks on, making this test render scene, maybe it was a little bit too ambitious to make a full-blown machinima once a month, especially since Jeff and I both worked full-time. It wasn't feasible. It wasn't something that, a lot of machinima artists out there who work alone pour all their time into this. But the fact that we lived on opposite sides of the planet, there was Netherlands and Canada, there was a 6-hour time difference at the best of times, yeah. Would these ideas be too random? Would they make sense? If it goes back to where we're filling in our own lore, headcanon, stuff like that. And eventually the project grew stagnant and it just flopped. But from that collapsed project, there was just something on my mind always. I wanted to do something. I wanted to make something, and that's where the Lost Codex was born from. So this part of the origin story comes from Jeff and I agreed to stop this project and go back to the drawing board. And this was early January 2016. So one night I crawl into bed and I'm browsing through Twitter before I go to bed. And I see one particular tweet that stands out. That tweet came from Samwise. Samwise, the well-known artist who works at Blizzard, has been at Blizzard since the very beginning. And Samwise, still to this day, pushes a lot of his art and personal artwork and comics and stuff like that. And one of his personal mottos is ABC, always be creating. And he posted this little short tweet talking about ABC and always creating content in some sort of way. And I remember staring at that and thinking, like, that was Samwise poking me in the forehead and, slapping my cheek saying, hey, wake up, stay focused on this. And I remember feeling a little bit discouraged. I put my phone down, plugged it in, rolled over and went to sleep discouraged, but also a little bit inspired. Like what could I do? What could I do? So I was walking to work the next day, and a lot of people had told me, a lot of my friends had told me, Jesse, you're obsessed with the lore. You're obsessed with the story of World of Warcraft. Why don't you make lore videos? You should really make lore videos. And I said, no, there's some amazing lore videos out there. Doran's movies, at the time he was known as Hellscream, and of course, Nobble 87. I watch these guys' videos all the time. So why would I try and make something when I already enjoy that content? But then I continued thinking about it, and I continued to think about it, and I said, okay, well, my strength is writing scripts, but also knowing the lore. But I've got Jeff. We work together as a team, and we've won multiple contests. So I thought, what if we made machinima, but lore machinima? And I thought, okay, well, that goes back to the full-blown machinimas aren't practical. So I went to Jeff and I said, what about if we started a channel for telling the lore through machinima? And of course, Jeff said, again, that's not practical. We just tested this with the test render and Lordaeron and stuff like that. And I said, well, what if we did stop motion machinima? Again, going back to Lords of War and Burdens of Shauhau. And I remember in my initial pitch, I was thinking like we would show an image and then transition. And I wasn't sure how to transition. So I said, what if it was just a quick flip of a page? And I remember saying flip of a page, and Jeff interrupted me. And what did my page flip remind you of, Jeff?
The tale of three brothers from the last Harry. Was it the last or was it the second last? Anyway, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. That sequence in the movie was basically a storybook come to life, and I'm like, well, how about something like that?
And Jeff threw that at me, and that jumped into my head and said, that's it. That's exactly what we need to do. That's a perfect format. I couldn't articulate the type of format to post this in, and I had only said page flip, and that I wasn't even thinking of Tale of Three Brothers. So the storybook idea was formed. We started talking, like, we call it a tome, what we call it charter. We didn't want to call it Chronicle because Chronicle 1, it wasn't out yet, but it was coming out soon. So eventually we decided on the word codex, but we needed a prefix for it. So what could we call it? The what codex, the keeper's codex. We come up with the Magi's codex, the lore master's codex, the storyteller's codex.
This went on for like a good couple of weeks, maybe even. We
Anyone
were really
who's
stuck on it.
We were. I was. I think Jeff, you really liked Keeper's Codex because you actually ended up using that. We'll get to that in a second. But anyone who's made a character in World of Warcraft or any RPG knows that the name is the most important. I was stuck on this name. So we said, we'll come back to the name. Let's just work on this. And I remember saying I was packing, getting ready to go on a vacation. I was going to Florida during March break with two of my friends. And I was sitting in the airport that morning and I messaged Jeff and I said, would we need an animated intro for this? Would we need some sort of introduction to our videos like you see on other YouTube videos? What do you think? And Jeff said, well, let's think about it. And let me think about it. I'm at work right now, but I'll get back to you. I said, okay. So I hopped on my flight and off I went, flew down to Florida. And I got to Florida and there was a link waiting for me in our chat from Jeff. And he was already in bed at this point, but he said, here's a test render of an animated intro I did. And we don't have the first initial test render, but we have the second one. And essentially what you see now as our introduction is exactly what Jeff did as a completely blind test render just out of the blue. I'll let Jeff talk a little. I was on a flight to Florida, so I had no involvement in it.
I can't actually quite remember how I came up with like the whole sequence of put the book there and then let the letters animate in like that. But I think I started with like listening to the World of Warcraft soundtrack or any Blizzard soundtrack actually, because whatever we wanted to do with all Blizzard assets. So I'm listening through the World of Warcraft soundtrack and all of a sudden Legacy is the name of the track, came up from the original World of Warcraft soundtrack. And there's this small, like 5-6 second piece at the end that's like, well, that's nice and catchy. Let's give that a try. And going on from that, we knew we wanted to do the codex thing, so I started going through the World of Warcraft monoviewer, looking for big books, and most of the books are not meant to be looked at in a close-up, so most of the books are really, really low res. But there were a couple dwarven books, I think they are. Like the giant ones. I think one of them is in the Crystal Catacombs place where Magni used to stand back in the day when he was a a crystal statue. In the end, I found one of those. I added a page flip transition to like make it appear, added a little bit of dust to insinuate like a heavy book falling down. And then I added a simple text animation and went on from there. And I think by then it was probably like 11 or 12 p.m., like nearly midnight for me. So I'm like, all right, I think I've done enough for today. I made the render, uploaded it to YouTube, sent the link to Jesse, and went to bed. And the next morning, I think I woke up with Jesse like gushing over how brilliant I was, right?
That was it. I got into the hotel room and I was talking to my friends on the flight about it, and we were coming up with different ideas. The thing to keep in mind is Jeff and I did not talk about any sort of back and forth on what the intro was. It was very like, we need an intro, let's come back to this. So I was brainstorming my entire flight. And those ideas never saw the light of day because Jeff proposed what you see now. The only thing that was different was the font was different. So it wasn't the current font that we use. Yeah. What is the name of the font that we use? It's a funny name, isn't it?
The font we use now for the Lost Codex title itself is named Cosmic Love.
Cosmic Love. That is the letters of the Lost Codex.
And the font that we use for most of the ink codex text, the text on the pages, is Optimus Princeps, I believe it's called.
The initial font, and it wasn't the Lost Codex. It was actually Jeff had used in this test render the Keeper's Codex, and the lasers kind of painted themselves in. Different font. There was no globe in as the 0, which is iconic of our brand. Yeah, and the background was different.
Mostly because the O in that font was more like square instead of round. So
very square. I'm looking at it. Yeah. Looking at it right now, and so no globe, different font, background was different. But the musical tune that you hear now when the Lost Codex episode starts, I listened to that over and over, and I was thinking to myself, what is that? That is amazing. That is like the perfect level of musical intro to a series because it fades off at this perfect quiet rate. I remember showing my friends and they were all like, oh my God, like all your ideas are gone. I said, I don't even care if we're not using my ideas. This is amazing. So from there, we went on to change the font. Jeff, we came up with the idea to throw the globe in as the O, and we ended up changing the background entirely. At that point, we were using a garrison, the Mage Tower, one of the desks up in the Mage Tower in the Alliance garrison for the purpose of the Lost Codex intro. Again, to repeat, if you guys want to listen to the soundtrack that we use, it's called World of Warcraft Legacy, and it's from the original World of Warcraft soundtrack. It's kind of become our official tune that we just refer to as our like the Lost Codex song kind of thing.
Hold on, I think actually, yeah, I think I'm running through my personal YouTube account now, and if I go back to the 25th of March 2016, there is this video called Codex Intro Test 1 there. That's interesting. And what I can see from the thumbnail is that the globe was actually there.
Was it?
But it's a completely different font though. It's not the squarey font. It's interesting. I'll send you the link after this recording.
Point of the matter is, there was no heavy back and forth of this intro. What you see now is pretty much what Jeff's original brain fart of an idea. How's this? That scene with Jeff Goldblum from Jurassic Park. There it is. There. Yep. It was perfect. So beyond that, I got back from the vacation, and during the vacation, I was writing the script and some different ideas, and it came to be what we call building the fantasy, building the codex. And a lot of that was technical aspect on Jeff's hand. I wasn't even at my computer. I was on vacation, but a lot of these test effects came into play over the next couple of weeks through Jeff playing around with them. So I'll let Jeff talk about those right now.
Yeah, so I started going on from the idea of a living storybook. So I started by using just paper or parchment images as the background for the shots. And through the years, I built up some sort of a collection of motion graphics mostly, and the ones I mostly used are like ink transitions. So you've got a white image that slowly turns black as ink like fills the entire screen. And through some sort of technical wizardry that is a bit outside the scope of this episode, you can use that clip to make other layers, other assets of your shot animate in to the shot. of course, the whole ink animation, it fit the fantasy of like a living storybook. It's completely Tom Riddle like, if you're going to reference Harry Potter. So yeah, so I was like mostly trying out different effects, trying out different blending modes mostly, because of course when you record characters and objects in the model viewer, they've got a like basic lighting, and if you stick them on parchment, they're gonna stand out as a sore thumb. Mostly testing out ways to make them blend in with the pages better, give them a sketchy effect, make them like actually like drawn in. I discovered there was a cartoon effect. Went on from there, and I believe we also are supposed to talk about the implied shots now. Jesse, you want to share your view on that?
Well, at this point in time, so a lot of the initial stages of this mysterious Keeper's Codex, because we had still hadn't at this point decided on Lost. Jeff was sending me a lot of test renders, and what the language him and I use today in a lot of episodes when we're making our episodes stemmed from these early days. We have one shot called the implied shot. Implied shots are scenes or moments in lore that we show without actually showing everything that's happening. We show using diagrams and representing icons. The very first implied shot we ever used was describing the 5 elements on Azeroth. And rather than just showing a whole bunch of fire, water, and air colliding on this planet, we had this runic circle with 4 different little frames on the outsides of the circle, and we put fire in one, water, air in the other, and then we filled the middle of the runic circle with this spirit-looking icon to represent the element of spirit. From there, we would use it when the 4 elemental lords were defeated by the old gods. We had this runic diagram with Ragnaros, Alakir, Therazane, and Neptulon, and one by one, their faces in the frames faded out and were replaced by the faces of the old gods from the Hearthstone artwork. We didn't know what to call that at the time, but nowadays we call that an implied shot. So in my screen direction, I'll write the very first thing, screen direction implied shot, and then I'll describe the implied shot. Jeff has a whole bunch of presets saved of different frames, different ruins, different ways to show events in the lore without actually showing them. We've also had, and I actually had a little bit of a nostalgia rush looking at this, something we had back in the day called diagram shots, diagram models, which were something that was to really create that ancient tome of knowledge, almost like that Da Vinci sketch that you see in those old photos, you know, the human with his arms out and the different arm directions and stuff like that. And there's all these like little scribbles and writings around.
I think they call it the Vitruvian Man.
Thank you. I was struggling to find the words and I just described it instead. We had a couple of those in our early episodes. If you go to the very first episode, when we talk about the Naraki page he's almost in a T-Man pose. We have these little diagrams around the page to show, a little lore about his helmet and little facts about his tentacles and his arms. Just little details that if you were looking at a tome of knowledge about an old god minion for some weird reason, there would be these little writings inside, almost, I guess Harry Potter is the constant theme, very Half-Blood Prince when Harry opens up the potions book and there's these little notes in the margin of the pages, stuff like that. We did a lot of that in our early episodes. We don't do that nowadays.
It's almost like creating our own sort of concept art, because that's also a thing, not specifically Blizzard, but like concept art in general. You have like the biggest is a shot of the character itself, and then like small details that the modelers or other people in the team would need to know exactly would be shown. And that's, now you mentioned that, we haven't done that in the longest while. We need to do that again. Write that in.
I agree. We'll write that into the next script. And actually, now that you say that, Jeff, a lot of Samwise's concept arts have that, where he writes in these little story elements, whether it's, I remember seeing this sketching of a Pandaren warrior, and there were arrows pointing towards a sword, and it talked about what the sword was made out of, and then little beads on his beard, and it talked about what the beads meant hanging in his beard. And we wanted to create that concept art style, and we haven't done it in a while, so we'll fix that.
I even believe like we included like the little scribbling, or at least maybe that was just in test footage, but like the little scribbles like the "be careful, very sharp," something like that.
Yeah, just little things to make the book come alive. And as time went on, we just kind of forgot about it. So we'll go back to that one day. The other big shot that we do is we call it a painting shot, and it's the exact opposite of an implied shot. It's developed as a very large scale battle, not necessarily a battle, but a scene that we feel deserves special screen time over others. So when the 4 old gods defeated the elemental lords, we showed that very simply. But when we wanted to show the elemental lords fighting back against them, we wanted to show them decimating the old god armies. I think our second or third shot was of each of the 4 elemental lords in this panning left to right scene of them just utterly decimating all these different old god minions across the battlefield.
So many bugs. Wow.
So many bugs. There was a lot of assets in that image. I think the very first painting scene we did was Ragnaros versus Alakir.
Yeah.
And we did a divide diagonally down the page, and they were fighting, and then we painted it with like an oil painting effect, and it looked like something you would see in like an art gallery.
Yeah. We had like this talk about like a painting shot to turn it into a painting, and in the end I found literally an oil painting filter effect in Photoshop, and tweaking that, going back and forth about that a couple of times. In the end, we settled on a certain style, and we've been using that one ever since, as well sparingly. And in other terms, is like mostly the painting shot. What I also think about the painting shot is that it's the most colorful shots. Usually, when we create a page, it blends in with the parchmenty background, so it's like a bit more brownish, a bit more muted, but the painting shots are like the shots that go full color.
We don't use them very often. There's about 2 or 3 per episode, and we save it for big moments or something that really catches your attention, specifically comes to mind. In the Argus episodes, there's a shot with Kil'jaeden with his students, and they're looking up at the sky, and it's a whole scenic shot of the temple in the foreground, and there's just a lot of magic going on in the scene, so your eyes are drawn to the effects, and it's a really cool scene. So we tend to linger on that for a second. We don't want to do a fast transition. We want you to see, because there's also a lot of time spent in Jeff's workshop on that.
Yeah, that's actually something that, especially in the early videos, I haven't looked back on them in quite a while, but I think like in the early videos they were almost rushed in terms of their pacing, because I almost literally based the length of each shot on the voiceover I got from Jesse. And
I did not speak slowly.
No, you did not.
No, I did not. I just went back and watched our first couple episodes, and my pacing is awful. Let's not talk about that. Yep. That was definitely something that came with feedback over time. The other main feature of our channel is the holocore. And during the first 2 episodes of development time, Jeff and I started to brainstorm, what if we wanted to show a more fast-paced or something not page-flipping style, something a little bit different, a kind of counter to the Codex Living Storybook episodes that we were doing. And I remember we initially wanted something that could provide quick facts and summaries of races or people, while the Codex would serve as a history textbook, something a little bit more long-term. That we'll come back to in a second. That didn't last long. But I came up with the idea of using Titan assets while running through Storm Peaks and Ulduar. There's a mob in Storm Peaks called a data bank, and it's this little floating dice of some kind with this cool effect around it. It's where the mechanomes are. And I remember thinking, like, Titan Keepers probably have these data banks, these facilities with these massive amounts of information. What if the Lost Codex guys got their hands on this?
If you think about, I think the Halls of Stone, one of the encounters, it's basically literally Bronzebeard interacting with a computer.
It is, and that's actually what I kind of threw at Jeff, and we were talking like, how can we show this? And it was your idea, if I remember, Jeff, to use the globe in our title screen. Yeah, that asset.
Yeah, let me just check real quick, because I did clean up my personal YouTube account, but I specifically left those very ancient, like the very first tests, I left them in for nostalgia's sake, if anything. And we didn't start out with the orb as being like the holocore as it is now. It always was like a high-tech sort of projector. And I don't know...
Projecting upwards, kind of.
Yeah, projecting upwards. that eventually turned, like I said, well, how can we go from the intro screen with the Lost Codex, the book, and the text logo? How can we go from that to our new scene, which is the projector? I don't know which one of us came up with the idea, but I'm going to have to guess it was probably me.
It was you.
Yeah, to animate the globe from the codex, and to use that as like the projector. I'm trying to figure out. Let's see. So the very first hologram tryout I did was on April 14th, 2016, and by April 17th, 2016, which is that's a nice date. That's 2 years to the day. The Facts Intro Test 1 video, that one actually uses the orb. It moves into a position very awkwardly, but that does use the orb and draws a frame around it. So yeah.
And this was all done before our very first episode went live. Our first episode went live on April 21st. So we were already getting ready for future episodes before the current episode was finished.
We wanted to build in some sort of buffer so that we could, while we were working on things, we could keep releasing things. And that went on for like a couple of months. And then the buffer ran out, and we've basically been hauling ass ever since to get these out as fast as possible.
Pretty much. So after the Jeff came up with the idea to use the idea came, okay, well, what do we call these types of episodes? Because these were supposed to be, and I'll say this, it was my idea to use these as fast, short videos. Our very first Holocore episode is 1 minute and 40-something seconds long. That didn't last long. The more lore for Legion came out.
That lasted about 1 or 2 videos at most.
And they, jumped up to 2 minutes, and then 3, and then 4. And I think our longest Holocore is 10 minutes long, starring Diva Gregory as Zalatath. It became this sort of this fact where we could talk about this artifact weapons and personal stories rather than talk about long moments in history. And so the fantasy of it being short, quick facts kind of faded, but we still loved the concept of the Holocore, so we kept that. We haven't done a Holocore in some time, or a true Holocore, rather, I should say. We did a Holocore themed for the Antorus episode, but it was a little bit different. But the name Holocore, that was, going back to we're stuck on the Lost Codex for a while. Holocore was a collaborative effort between my friends Curtis and Matt, and we sat in Matt's car for 6 hours coming up with the name Holocore. We threw every name out there. He's a big sci-fi lover, so we were coming up with all the different ideas, and I had about 2 pages of ideas written down. And the reason why we sat for 6 hours was because the Holocore episode number 1 was supposed to go live the next day. So it was the only thing Jeff was waiting on was for me to come up with the name of this type of episode, because he had to redo the intro. So Jeff was going to reanimate the intro and just shove the video up onto YouTube and go from there. And 6 hours of collaborating, came up with Holocore, threw it at Jeff, and Jeff said, you know what, that makes sense, that works. And the music from the episode, actually, it's the only soundtrack we use that's not from Blizzard's musical archives. It's bringing in an old name, Rallied, from a couple years ago. Rallied had made a song for a university project that I was working on for a film studies class, and he did it as sort of a little test for him, but also used my assignment as kind of as a format. And it was just a really catchy song that he has up on his YouTube channel. If you go search Rallied Fagali on YouTube and you look for the song The Runaways theme, that is the Holocore theme. And it's just a very fast-paced, dramatic, but very peaceful to listen to song, and we just felt it fit the theme of what we're going for. So Rallied actually wrote to YouTube and said, hey, like, it's cool, let them use the video, let them use the music rather. And from then on in, we've always used the Runaways theme as our Holocore theme. Alrighty, and that covers the origins and the inside look of the Holocore. Something that we've never really talked about is contributing members and who's kind of played what role in the Lost Codex. Now, this might seem like an obvious answer, obviously, because there's Jeff and there's myself. But in the earliest days of the Lost Codex, there were some crucial key members that really made a difference in getting what you see now as the Lost Codex really refined and really polished. So before we even launched the channel, were both excited to get this going, but we had our doubts. This was new territory for us, right?
Yeah.
This was, we had both made machinimas over the last couple of years, but it was only once a year. We had never dedicated ourselves to a constant release of videos. So naturally, self-doubt kicked in. So we reached out to a couple of our friends. Taryn and Gregory played a very important role, especially after the first episode came out. Jeff, I know a lot of his feedback directly affected you. So what sort of help did Taryn bestow upon us after our first episode, specifically the technical feedback?
He mostly had tips on how to deal with the audio and the effects for audio to make the voice stand out a bit better, for example, in the final mix. And that I eventually took those tips and crafted some presets out of them, and I've been basically using those presets ever since.
If you go back and listen to our very first episode, visually it's great, but when you listen to it, aside from my voice being very different because my narration has definitely changed over the last 2 years, just the general audio, the audio in general just was not up to par to what it is now. And so what you hear now, that crispness and that clearness is, as Jeff said, from the presets, Taryn's presets, and it was very minor things that made such huge differences. So Taryn played a role in that. He also, before the first episode, was really active in giving us that push of encouragement. He was asking questions, and actually this is where Diva Gregory comes in as well, is they both played this kind of repetitive asking of certain questions that we hadn't asked ourselves, what we wanted to accomplish, how we differed from other content creators, what was our end goal, and they went into depth. Taryn was looking at more of the technical aspect and the visual aspect. Diva was talking to me about the writings and stuff like that, and really forced both Jeff and I to enter a discussion about, okay, well, we haven't thought about any of these questions, and it really helped shape, especially those early shaky first few months of the Lost Codex, what we wanted to do and how both it affected the end game video and the production side of the making of the videos. Overall, Taryn and Diva both really helped us hone down what we wanted to accomplish and how to make it our own, how to make it just stand out as, not just a little side fun project, but something that really takes up most of our free time. When Jeff and I may live 6 hours apart in different time zones, but when I get home from work, I sit down right away, start writing scripts, research, and Jeff, you're the same way. It's just constant every single day doing something for the Lost Codex. Another person that was actively involved in the early stages of the Lost Codex was actually Matt Burns, who also works at Blizzard Entertainment. You might know Matt Burns as one of the authors for Chronicles Volume 1, 2, and 3. Matt really helped us define and identify what we wanted to accomplish with the lore. It was really good to bounce ideas off of him, and talking to Taryn gave us some technical aspects, and talking to Diva, she was asking us, about our channel, about the writing, but about the lore itself. Not that there was any direct questions about the lore, but it really helped me shape out how to lay out my scripts and how to properly ensure that what I was saying wasn't just directly taken from any one source. And that's actually kind of what Chronicle is all about. Is Chronicle is just this collaboration of so many different avenues of lore. And Matt was actually one thing I was worried about, because we were new to this, was, are we able to post pictures from Chronicle, and would that get us in trouble? Is because it's an outside publisher from Blizzard, would that get us with legal issues? And so Matt asked some questions, asked the right people, and got back to us, and all was well. A lot of our early episodes had a lot of Chronicle art, so thank you, Matt Burns. But beyond the earliest days of early April, May 2016, Jeff and I were off on our own doing our videos, and it was actually later in the year that some other people became involved, just with expanding the Lost Codex in general. And so beyond the earliest days, the first person who comes to mind was actually another Blizzard employee. His name is Jay Kurtze. He works at Blizzard on the community management team for the Warcraft team. He reached out to us in summer of 2016, and his role in the community team is to reach out to content creators and content growth, stuff like that. He reached out to me, and we talked back and forth, and he actually secured us some BlizzCon media passes that year. It was kind of a last-second thing where we realized we had the media passes, so unfortunately we couldn't squeeze in an interview that year, but we did meet some awesome people in the media room and really kind of helped shape where we were going with the Lost Codex. Jay was also involved in the launcher video that we did for Surmar. We'll talk a little bit about that later. And since then, he's helped further the growth of our channel just with anything from helping with an early copy of Chronicle to setting us up with interviews at last BlizzCon with Alex and Shaney, the announcement rather for Battle for Azeroth. And through him, we've actually also got to meet some amazing community managers on the Warcraft team who have helped expand and grow the Lost Codex. Chris Fowler, who runs the World of Warcraft Twitter account, the WoW Twitter account has been so active in helping share our videos and share our links. Got to meet Brett Forbes and Caden House at BlizzCon. So really cool to meet all these people through Jay. So Jay definitely has helped in getting our channel just little bits of the spotlight here and there that really makes all the difference. At BlizzCon 2016, we met one nerd in particular, and that nerd is Final Boss. We ran up to Final Boss. He knew who we were, but he didn't know our faces because we didn't really show our faces at the time. We actually became close friends with Final Boss that year. We hung out with him a lot and we talked with him a lot. And it was shortly after BlizzCon, if I'm not mistaken, Jeff, that he set up that interview with us, right?
Yeah, I think it was like December or January or something, right around those periods.
It was right after. That's kind of a blurry time for me, but it was right after that, and we joke around saying that our first interview was with Final Boss on Final Boss TV. He had both Jeff and I on live on stream, Jeff on webcam, and myself. I didn't have a webcam at the time, so I had a little floaty rotating image to represent my head. And I think that stream is what kind of pushed for both of us to buy a new webcam, Jeff, as well as start streaming ourselves on Twitch.
Yeah, it definitely pushed me to get a better microphone because I used one of those like earpiece microphones like for your phone. So listening back on the interview was like, oh God, what have I done? This could have sounded so much better if I had some proper equipment. And well, here we are.
I don't think we were kind of prepared for that, but it definitely pushed us. It pushed me to go buy a new webcam, or buy a webcam because I didn't have one to begin with. And I was very nervous. I don't know about you, Jeff. I was very nervous going into that interview because it was the first thing we'd ever done, and it was live. It was live. It wasn't just something that was recorded and edited later. It was live on Twitch, and at one point there was 300 or so people tuning in, and that was scary stuff. So, but as it was happening, I kind of like relaxed, and I was like, okay, you know what? Even though they can't see my face, this is actually really fun. And that's kind of what pushed me to start streaming early 2017. The Lost Codex Twitch account, twitch.tv/Lost Codex Lore, because the Lost Codex is not available on Twitch. So we kind of credit Final Boss in pushing us towards our streaming time, which we're going to pick back up now that Battle for Azeroth is close. Another person who gave an awesome shout out for us was Nobble. Nobble actually at the end, it was his end 2016 video, end of the year kind of reflections, talked about us, and that actually got us quite a bit of attention. I think for the next 2 or 3 videos, just hundreds of comments from people saying, hey, Nobble sent me, hey, Nobble pointed me in your direction, awesome stuff. And usually our subscription growth on YouTube goes up after a particular posting, either if it goes on Reddit or somewhere. But over the course of those few days, we easily went up 1,000 subs just from 23 seconds of Nobble talking about us on his video. So that was really awesome. Later in the year, in October of 2017, Bellular gave us a shout out. He was talking about the origins of the universe, and we had just done our own origins of the universe video. And he asked if he could use some of our footage from that particular video. I said, go for it. And he talked about us for a little while, and we were sitting at around 18.5 thousand subscribers. And over the next few days, we jumped up to just over 21,500 subscribers, just from a quick shout out, all because Bellular wanted to show one of the visual pieces we had used in our video. So 15 seconds of talking, and we jumped up another couple thousand subscribers, which we weren't really paying attention, Jeff, because you and I were both preparing to go to BlizzCon, so we were kind of a little bit distracted. And I think I got to California, and you were there, and I was like, dude, have you looked at our subscription number? Like we've gone up a couple thousand in the last 48 hours. So that was huge. Novel and Bellular, thank you guys so much for the shout outs. Another person we're going to talk about very quickly was Zillions. We met her at BlizzCon 2017. You may know Zillions as the Final Boss brand manager at BlizzCon. She introduced us to a lot of new people. And fearless.
If I may interrupt, she was also the very first one to get one of our shirts.
She was. We got some shirts made for BlizzCon 2017, and we made everyone in our room buy one. And then we had a couple extras to give away. We didn't want to sell them because we didn't have enough, but she saw them and she pointed at them and she says, I'm buying one of those, whether you're selling or not. So that was our very first shirt sale, was to Zillions, and official shirt sale, not because I forced it on my other friends who were staying with us in the room. So she actually introduced us to a lot of new people at BlizzCon, which was really cool because that's what BlizzCon's about, is meeting these new people, meeting some exciting new content creators, fans, just talking with everyone in general, and having her there to kind of break the ice with a lot of people. You know, BlizzCon can be scary, but Zillions is fearless, and we got to meet a ton of new people. After BlizzCon, she actually played a huge role in revamping our Patreon and a lot of the smaller aspects of the Lost Codex brand. So she's now our brand manager as well, and she's actually shaped a lot of the rewards you see on our Patreon, patreon.com/the Lost Codex. So that's all because of Zillions' hard work. So thank you so much, Zillions. If you haven't followed her on Twitter yet, definitely go follow her on Twitter. BlizzCon 2017 was just a huge year for us in general. We got to meet Jay the Bard before he won the talent contest, I may add.
I was about to say before he got famous.
Jay the Bard ran up to us at our meet and greet at Con Before the Storm, gushed over how much of a huge fan he was over us, briefly mentioned he was in the talent contest, and I said, you know what, dude, you're going to do great. I didn't know what he did. I had no idea based on his, what his skill level was, nothing. So when I saw him on stage, just rocking the stage, I was standing in the Diablo line, and some people behind me were like, oh my God, this guy? This guy's amazing. And I was thinking, damn, I wish I talked to him more yesterday, because I briefly asked what he did. He said Bard songs, and then he ran off, and that was it. So we got to meet Jay the Bard, and we've actually become close friends with Jay. Jay actually voiced a small little role for us in our YouTube drama video. He got to play the role of YouTube themselves. Sorry, Sargeras themselves.
The devil incarnate.
The devil incarnate. So that was fun. And we've actually got a special project under wraps with Jay that we're working on right now, involving a particular allied race. So stay tuned for that. Brutal Static also interviewed us recently, and that was just so fun. It was during his 24-hour stream. Jeff was in chat, answering questions in chat. I was on stream, and it was a fast interview. It was about an hour long, and it was just, I got to rant about BlizzCon. I got to rant about the YouTube drama, and our subscriber account jumped up a couple hundred. I want to say 600 that day over the next few days. And we usually don't see huge sub counts like that. A lot of people said on our videos, hey, how's it going? Brutal sent me, or a couple new Twitch subscribers as well. So that was fun. And the last big shout out I want to give is to, of course, Wowhead, because Wowhead, we just did our Antorus video in the way after we did our Tomb Sargeras and Nighthold raid videos. And it was just after... it was actually in the middle of our YouTube crisis, we'll call it, the demonetization and all that with YouTube. So we wanted to get, how could we get as much attention to our video as possible, since even though we're not making any money off ads. And so Zillions reached out to a bunch of people, and she said, yeah, Wowhead's going to share the video. I thought, oh, that's awesome. They're going to do a retweet on Twitter. That's cool. But they didn't do a retweet on Twitter. Perculia actually wrote an entire article about the Lost Codex on Wowhead, talked about the YouTube drama, talked about what was happening, highlighted our Patreon page, all of our social media pages, and then talked about the Antorus video, linked to the 2 other videos we had done. I wasn't expecting a community spotlight like that from Wowhead at all. I was expecting just a tweet on Twitter, a retweet, something simple. So to see that whole page about us on Wowhead was huge, especially considering we were kind of kicked down from YouTube over the last month and a half at that time. So that was definitely, thank you everyone at Wowhead. Perks, thank you so much for doing that, because that was unexpected, but awesome. We're going to wrap this up very soon, but first we're going to talk about some favorite projects. Jeff, what's your favorite Lost Codex project?
I'm going to have to say that would probably be the Suramar video we did, the one that ended up on the launcher.
Yeah, that one was new for us. There's a lot of challenges for that one too, but after doing it, we started in the Christmas break of 2016, and it took us about a whole month to make. I'd say that was the longest episode we had worked on.
To date, definitely. Yeah.
To date, what was some of the challenges of that episode?
Well, for one, you wanted, or at least you mentioned, we should do a new intro, like an intro in the style of Suramar. And the thing was, like, we were both very proud of our intro, because it was like lightning. It happened, and it was great. And now you ask me to do that again. I'm like, oh. Other challenges were the length of the piece, the fact that it was like both. It was basically like 2 episodes in one. First half of it was a storybook episode talking about the history of the Nightborn and the history of the Nighthold itself, and then after that was the bit about every boss, and that was a holocore episode basically. So instead of like doing those 2 each in their own project, technically, I suddenly had to find a way to like import all the holocore stuff into a storybook project. So that was kind of tricky as well. And also what I found pretty challenging was actually getting good shots of the place. Because of all the work both Jesse and I do on the Lost Codex, neither of us are really in a raiding guild anymore. So getting there like in time, because you can't wait for LFR to open up over like a period of 5-6 weeks. So that was a bit of a challenge, but I think we have somehow we managed to do it. I think Jesse, you and your friends got you into that place, got you taking a whole lot of screenshots.
Yeah, one friend, they cleared it on the first night, and I hopped in there and just spammed that screenshot button, because one of the other challenges about this that's going to tie into this was scheduling for this, because we had talked to Jay in December, and he called me and he said, what kind of projects are you guys working on that we could put on the launcher? So I returned the question to him, and I said, well, is there anything big you guys are going to be talking about? He goes, well, the Nighthold's coming out, at this unannounced date. And I said, what if we did a Nighthold episode? So I went to Jeff and we pitched the idea, and Jay said, okay, so we're obviously not going to be able to get it on when the Nighthold goes live, because that's going to be prioritized for that. But how about a week after? And I said, okay, we got our screenshots a week before the video went live. So we had to basically, the first half of the episode was done with the storybook, but all the screenshots in game we needed for the backgrounds for the particular bosses in the holocore, which is the ending. So that was crunch time for the animation stage, because we knew we had to get it done at a certain point. And so I told my buddy, I said, get your guild to clear this as fast as possible, because I need in there. So that was fun to kind of see the raid. I didn't get, they didn't drag me in for any free loot, but I know. One of the challenging aspects for me about this episode was not only the length of the script, because it was the first time writing such a long episode, and I wanted to make it not repetitive. I didn't want to talk about the story of Suramar and then repeat my stuff in the holocore episode that followed it right away. So it was a little bit different in that aspect, but what was really cool and also a little bit challenging, was Blizzard's involvement with the script. I had to send every iteration of the script to Blizzard, and they actually had to go through and approve it, which was really cool because I think it was Sean Copeland himself who was editing it. Sean Copeland is the lead historian at Blizzard. He was going through, and it was really cool to see these little notes from Sean in our Google Docs on tweak this, fix that. And it wasn't so much like the lore was wrong, but it was the wording. I'm trying to think of an active example here, but there were some things that I was saying, and as the narrator, it sounded like I was saying them as fact. And Sean would come in and say, he'd add his own personal note saying, brainstorming, that's a really good idea, and maybe you're leaning towards you are right, but in the lore itself, Blizzard's never confirmed that fact. So I just had to go back and change little things here and there. When you read my scripts, it's awkwardly written, but they're meant to be read as a narration. So Sean and I went back and forth, and it was really cool to work with Blizzard directly on these scripts, because we knew if they were going to put it on the launcher, they had to make sure that everything was polished and good to go. It was only supposed to be on the launcher for Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and it actually went up Thursday and stayed till Monday. So that was huge for us. That was probably one of the coolest things to happen to the Lost Codex, to see our video on the Blizzard launcher.
And it showed, I think, because our subs went up quite a bit, didn't they?
They did. We just were climbing like no tomorrow. And obviously that's the most views, over 100,000, because it was right there in your face. So that was probably collectively our favorite project to work on, because it was
the best received.
The best received. The stakes were high. We got to work with Blizzard. It was new territory. Everything about it was just new and fresh. Tying right into that, the Tomb of Sargeras is a video that I remember fondly as well, because we learned a couple of things with the Nighthole video, some not mistakes, but things that we knew to correct in the future. So the Tomb of Sargeras was a bit more of a smoother transition. So that was fun to work with. But I'd say my favorite episode, aside from the Suramar episode, would have to be our Xal'atath Holocore episode.
Naifu.
And the reason we went back and did this is because, as I just mentioned earlier when I was talking about the very first Holocore episode we did, which was only a minute and a couple seconds long, our first Holocore episode talked about 3 artifact weapons, less than 2 minutes. And then we had other artifact weapon videos that were 5 to 6 minutes long, so I felt that we didn't do those first 3 any justice. And Xal'atath is one of the most controversial, one of the most interesting characters in Legion as a whole, so I wanted to go back and redo an entire episode, because at the time when we did the first episode, we didn't have a lot of lore on her backstory.
I think it's literally when we started that, it was Legion beta, I think.
It was beta, so we had such a limited access to further gamed content. Further, a lot of the artifact lore was progression in terms of weeks and weeks of your artifact research.
Yep.
And we didn't have access to that, so we did what we could, but suddenly later on we're like, wow, we missed a lot. So with the Xal'atath episode, what was really cool was the idea just came to me. I thought, like, instead of me narrating as the Lost Codex narrator, I thought, what if Xal'atath herself, this sentient, spooky knife, Sombra hacked the Holocore, and she told the story herself? And right away we're like, obviously, I can try to change my voice, but there's no way I could imitate Xal'atath in any way. So I reached out to voice actress we had worked with on quite a few projects, a good friend of ours, Diva Gregory. And it was really cool to work with her, because the script I had to write not from my perspective. So my whole writing style was shot out the window. I had to do this all from scratch. I had to write Xal'atath's first person perspective. I had to include that haughtiness, that sassiness, that little bit of a bite that she has in her voice.
Yeah, you basically had to become a cursed blade.
I had to become a cursed blade, or at least write a script so Diva could become a cursed blade.
Oh, and she did. Wow, she did.
She did, and she was very nervous about doing it. But listen to Xal'atath's voice, and she said to me, Jesse, I can't do that voice. That's really deep. And I said, So Diva, you've voiced some deep voice characters. By the way, for anyone who doesn't know, Diva Gregory has actually voiced a couple of characters for Blizzard. She voiced a character in High Mountain, Addie Fizzlebog, the gnome hunter. Hunters actually get her as a follower, but that little gnome that you train, who's Hemet Nesingwari's apprentice, she voices her, as well as a couple of Hearthstone cards from the Ungoro expansion. Definitely check her out. I had complete faith that Diva could do this, and we worked back and forth, and finally she hit that perfect level of just deep, not super deep, but like low voice sass. And we went through it, and it turned out to be one of the coolest episodes. I was so excited. We launched it on Twitch, and seeing people's reaction, because I started the episode as the narrator, and then she comes in and she hacks it. So people thought it was a regular episode, and then Diva just ruins everything as Xalatath, and it kind of goes from there. And this, like, just everything gets dark. The whole Lost Codex is supposed to be light and bright and shiny blue and yellow. Xalatath comes in, Diva comes in and makes everything purple and dark, and it was just a cool, different episode to do. And it's one of my favorite episodes just because of how unique it is. And it kind of inspired the, what if we brought in other voices to participate in the Lost Codex stuff? So Diva as Xalatath was the groundbreaking premiere of seeing other voices in the Lost Codex. So definitely one of my favorite projects to work on. Jeff, overall, what would you say the most challenging project was? And I think we both have the same answer.
Yeah, must have been the Origins of the Universe episode we did, just because
100%.
It was unlike anything we'd ever done before, because the Origins of the Universe, it talks about light and shadow colliding with each other and planets forming and all that. I'm like, there is no such thing in the model viewer. How am I going to create that?
It was, and actually, I think you had mentioned earlier, before we were recording, you're looking through your folders, and apparently this episode's folder is the smallest because it actually like most of the folders are pretty big, because all the characters you see on screen, they're all like short recorded video files of the character on a green screen, and then in the editing I take away the green screen, I make the shot and all that. But this episode only had very few actual like Warcraft characters from the model viewer. All the rest of it, all the particle effects, the universe creating itself, the star fields and all that, that's all generated in After Effects in the program I use. So that doesn't take up any size because it's not an asset you import. It's an asset that's literally generated by the video program itself. And that all these, if you go back and watch our first episode, you'll see there's a lot of like 3D effects in there. Jeff and I both agreed from the beginning, okay, this episode is going to take a while. So I did what I could. I wrote the script, I wrote the screen direction, and we both spent a couple of days looking up different tutorials and different ideas on what to do. And because this was going to be a very trial and error episode, I moved on to Xalatath's episode script, and actually the Eridar script. And a lot of these were all new territory for Jeff, making these new rendered effects, and they turned out awesome. And these effects are actually what Bellular used in his video when he gave us the shout out. So not only did it turn out to be one of the most visually heavy projects in terms of render time, I think it took well over 12 hours to render.
Yeah, I usually let my renders run overnight, especially like late in the projects when I start creating like the final lossless render of the entire video. And I think when I did that for the Origins, Universe Origins video, it took like, it was still running when I woke up in the morning. So that was a tough one. Definitely.
Not only one of the most visually heavy projects, but also, in my opinion, one of the most visually appealing. It was, and something that I did, one of the things I did as the narrator for this episode was I channeled my inner Carl Sagan. Anyone remembers Cosmos from the early or mid 90s, somewhere around there. I don't actually know if it was from the 90s, but either way, Carl Sagan, just the way he spoke, the way he narrated his videos, I thought, you know what, this is a good time. So I channeled my inner Carl Sagan for that episode. And overall, it's just one of those videos that's really calming to watch. just the music selection and the visuals. It's nothing, no big, huge clashes, no big, huge battles. Definitely want to go back and do part 2. The reason we haven't done part 2 was, again, this was a visually heavy project, so it did take more time. But it's on our list of episodes to return to. Closing this up, stuff for the future that I'm looking forward to, and I think you are too, Jeff, just Battle for Azeroth in general, new episodes to come out.
Mechanomes.
We're going to do episodes on Mechanomes, apparently. That's a thing. Jeff's just locked it in now. Add it to the schedule. Zandalari, Terrassian culture, talking about the other allied races. We're working on our first race rate. Sorry, go ahead.
And I'm sure, like, if we end up doing a video on the Vulpera, the Fox people, we could make bank on that.
People are going to go wild, especially when they announce that they're allied races. Holy moly. Our latest episode we're working on right now is the history of the Zandalari. We decided to focus on them first because they actually have the most history and the most lore for all of the allied races. And so we're not even touching Battle for Azeroth content right now. We're just using Chronicle and other sources and eventually building up to the Zandalari in Battle for Azeroth. Other things we're looking forward to the future, our merch store, which don't have a date for that yet, but it's coming soon. It's on its way. I mentioned earlier, BlizzCon 2017, we had shirts made, and I will gush about the shirts and say that they are one of the comfiest shirts I've ever worn.
That is actually a shout out we missed. How dare we? We completely missed Kel Fabulous.
I was saving her shout out for this part, actually.
Okay.
Because, so as Jeff just said, our logo for our shirt was done by Kel Fabulous. Check her out. Definitely an amazing artist. We're working together with her on some more merch stuff, and she has given me a lot of ideas on what we could do, what we could provide at first on our merch store. So obviously shirts, I love the idea of sweaters. Pins are huge. Everyone loves pins, especially at BlizzCon. It should be called PinCon because that's all that's at BlizzCon is just pin collectors everywhere. So we're definitely working on some ideas. We want to see what's practical in terms of production costs and stuff like that. Other ideas that came to mind, Jeff and I brainstormed, were bookmarks, notebooks, and phone covers, but we'll see when we get there. My dream is I would love to be able to bring some of this merchandise to BlizzCon and set up a merchandise stand outside the Con Before the Storm party on the Thursday night, because that'd be really cool to be able to sell some Lost Codex merchandise. But we're working on that.
And I'm gonna say it again: a Lost Codex Holocore beach ball.
Well, if you can find a beach ball production company, I'm all for that. A Holocore beach ball. But until then, I don't know where we can get that done.
Yeah, true.
No, Vistaprint does not print out beach balls.
Damn it.
Obviously, something we're looking forward to is conventions this year. BlizzCon is obviously the big one, but TwitchCon, we're thinking about going to TwitchCon. Got to up our Twitch presence a little bit, but I've seen pictures. We've heard things about TwitchCon in the past, and it just seems like a cool opportunity to meet new people. And honestly, that's one of the main reasons. At least it's one of the main reasons I go to BlizzCon. I don't know about you, Jeff, but meeting new people and hanging out with these friends that we've made over the years is probably one of the biggest reasons I go to BlizzCon itself.
Yeah, very true. For myself, when I went to the first BlizzCon in 2014, I went as like a once in a lifetime thing. And then I physically met up with you for was it the first time or?
That was our first time meeting face to face. Yeah, 2014. Yeah. We worked together for 5 years at that point, but we met face to face 2014.
And then I was on my own hotel room that year, and then the year after that, once in a lifetime, may as well be twice in a lifetime if I'm going to bunk up with Jesse and his friends. That'll be cheap on the hotel, and sure, I can afford myself that. And the year after that was basically the same, and year after, and by now, if we do end up going, and by all means we probably will, that'll be my 5th BlizzCon this year.
Sure, you get your veteran status. 5 years of BlizzCon, you don't actually get a pin, but you should get a pin. BlizzCon is definitely like the one thing I look forward to every year. We're gonna have our own episode on BlizzCon itself because we could talk for hours on this. But at BlizzCon, great opportunity for networking, merchandise at the con. We're hoping developer interviews. Fingers crossed. We'll see what happens later this year. Wrapping this up, final mentions. Just want to point out our Patreon. Thanks to Zillions, we have our revamped Patreon going on up there. So offering anything from behind-the-scenes script look, early access previews to some of the slides that are coming up, Discord, special Discord ranks, birthday cards, and more. We're always looking for feedback on what we offer as Patreon awards, what you would like to see that's enticing. So if you're a patron listening to this, feel free, message either of us. We're definitely looking for feedback. If you're not a patron, but you want to give feedback anyway, that is awesome too. You can find us on Twitch at twitch.tv/Lost Codex Lore, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, the Lost Codex, all that good stuff. We do have a Lost Codex Discord, so keep an eye out for a link on Twitter to join the Lost Codex community Discord. And final thanks. This is our 2-year birthday, and we couldn't have done this without so many involved people. So thank you to all those who played an active role in the early beginnings of the Lost Codex. Taryn, Diva, Matt, all my friends, all of our earliest fans or all of our fans, and just continue to support us, continue to comment, and just show the love for every single one of our videos. We both wish we could put out our videos more often, and we're developing a schedule. We're developing a routine now. We do both have day jobs that interfere with this. So hopefully one day we're hoping to be in a situation where we make enough or we're hired to make these videos, because that's ultimately our passion. We get home from work and we sit down to make these videos right away. As you heard earlier, Jeff gave up his raiding life for this. I would love to be able to do this full time. Thank you to Blizzard for all of that you've done for us, sharing our links, whether it's retweets on Twitter, posting our videos itself on Twitter, the community spotlight we had on the launcher, developer interviews at BlizzCon, media passes, all that stuff. They make all the difference in terms of growing our channel. So everyone at Blizzard who's been involved, who's a fan, thank you so much for everything you've done. And of course, thank you to you listeners who are listening here at our first official podcast. Definitely want some feedback on this. So we've definitely, this podcast is a rambly one. It's a longer one because it is our 2-year birthday. So we thought if anyone's going to be longer, it's going to be this one. We'll make sure that it's not as long and not as rambly in the future. Here's to many more years of the Lost Codex. Definitely not something that we both plan to stop soon. As Jeff and I just said, we want to do this full time eventually one day. So here's to many more years of that. Any closing thoughts, Jeff?
Yep, I'm completely agree with you. Let's keep this up. Let's go on for 3, 4, 5, who knows how many years.
We've got there's so much lore that I don't see us running out of space anytime soon. No. Stay tuned for the new episode coming out, The History of the Zandalari. That is in production right now, so that'll be coming out within, this podcast is going live on Saturday, so hopefully within a week after Saturday, a week and a half, get this episode out. And as always, feedback and thoughts on our episodes, Patreon, and now our podcast, our first official episode of Decoded, a Lost Codex podcast. My name is Jesse. I am your host.
And my name was Jeffrey, and I'm the video producer for the Lost Codex and occasional stand-in for the podcast.
Thank you guys for listening. We'll see you guys in the next episode.